It's another delicious day here in the Let's Make Food from Food Kitchen, and today I'm starting the process to make Canadian bacon. Did you know Canadian bacon and Irish rashers are pretty close to the same thing? Same kind of meat, mostly the same brine process, and really the brine cure that you make is based on your taste, and I've seen many variations with different herbs and things like that. So this is mine that I'm gonna make, and the difference between, okay, confession. True Canadian bacon is smoked in a smoker. I don't have a smoker. So mine's gonna get oven baked. But if you have a smoker, please do smoke it, and I'll have the instructions on how to do that as well. I just don't have a smoker, so maybe if I get some property and bigger backyard, and yeah, we'll see. I want an outdoor kitchen, that's what I really want. Pizza oven, the whole bit. Okay, moving on. I have already rinsed my pork loin, and we're gonna leave the fat on there. What I need to do right now is make my cure. It's the brine. So I have pink curing salt. This is Anthony's #1 pink curing salt. Every time I use this, I say it. It is toxic to use by itself. You cannot sprinkle this on your French fries and eat it and not have severe consequences, okay? This is not pink Himalayan salt. It is not the same thing. This is strictly for curing. Pink salt kills a lot of the bacteria in the meats and things that we don't want in there. Okay, so we are gonna rinse it off completely when we're done too. So once again, toxic if you try to use it as a table salt or a cooking salt. You're just gonna use it to cure, not for anything else. Yeah, okay. We're gonna pour it in our water. I've already measured everything. We should talk about that real quick too. The measurements is based on the weight of your pork loin. This is 3.2 pounds. So the recipe I have below is specifically for 3.2 pounds. If you try to use my recipe for a 5-pound pork loin, it's not gonna cure properly. It's not super complicated. If you have a calculator, you can do it. There's also a couple of websites that have a curing calculator for you that'll do it if you just put in the math or just put in the weight of your pork loin and then put in if you're doing a dry cure or a wet cure, and then it will do all your calculations for you. I have specifically 19 ounces of filtered cold water and my 5.8 grams of pink curing salt. This is sea salt, and it's 51 grams of sea salt. This is where having that kitchen scale can be very important. Okay, I have 25 grams of brown sugar. Then I have a teaspoon, and the herbs, you don't have to measure the herbs by weight, okay? The salts and the sugars you do. This is thyme, 1 teaspoon, 1 teaspoon of peppercorns, and 1 teaspoon of onion powder. I have 1 whole clove of garlic, and I was going to press it, but then I remembered I don't need to press it. I just need to smash it. So that's all I'm gonna do. But I used my press to do it. So I still use the tool I got out. Okay, what we wanna do is get this dissolved. And don't worry about the onion powder dissolving, just worry about the salts and the sugar. So you might have to let it sit for a minute and then stir it up some more. And while we're waiting for that, we can talk about storage. This is a 2-gallon Ziploc bag. This will not fit in a 1 gallon with the brine, and you do need to use all of the brine. You can put it in a container, a non-reactive container like glass, but you have to keep the meat submerged, and with this particular brine, it would be really hard to keep this submerged, which is why I like to use the plastic bag, because I can squeeze all the air out, and then I just put it in a container in the bag, so just in case we have a leak in the bag, it's contained. The next thing is you've got to flip it over every day, okay? Now, how long do I leave it in the fridge for, Michelle? Glad you asked. All right, my salts are melted. The only thing that's left floating in there is the onion powder and the rest of the herbs. So I am going to slide this right on in here, okay? I'm going to pour my mixture right on in there, okay? Now, I'm gonna get as much air out of here as we possibly can. So I'm gonna get it just close to that little bit, okay? And one of the ways you can do this is to put some water in your sink and set this without the top going underwater, and it'll naturally push the air out, which I think I might do so I can get it all out. So I'm gonna go, oh, that's actually not bad. Okay, one thing I forgot to do before I put it in the bag was to measure the thickness, because we are going to calculate our brine time based on the thickness, not the weight. I don't know why I was thinking it was the weight. So anyway, here we go. I'm just going to measure it at the thickest part, and that is 4 inches. So that would be 8 days plus 2 more, so we're 10 days, not 9 days. All right, so don't forget, you're gonna flip it over every single day, and we're gonna brine it for 10 days. When we pull it out, we're gonna rinse it really, 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 really well, and we'll talk about that when our 10 days is up. Welcome back. I am ready to go to the next step with our Canadian bacon and you. So I have my pan with a rack, and I have my Canadian bacon, and I have well rinsed it, scrubbed it, cold water, probably about 5 minutes. Make sure you're getting into those nooks and crannies to get all of that pink salt rinsed off. Then the next step that I did, and I didn't cover this in curing a pork belly, is that if you're concerned that it's going to be too salty, after you rinse it, take a container, fill it with cold water, put your pork in there for a couple of hours in the fridge to just let it kind of absorb some of that salt, if that's a concern you have, okay? So once you've done that step, if you're going to do that step, you are ready to go ahead and put it out. Now, if you are in fact smoking this, you can pat it dry some, let it sit out to drip, whatever you want to do. I'm baking it. I'm a little less concerned with that because I don't have a smoker. Maybe someday. So then what I want to do is, by the way, my oven's preheating to 250. What I want to do is put a good couple of inches of water in here, not so that it touches our pork loin, but what I want to do, the intent with this, is that as things drip off of our pork loin, if there's not liquid in the bottom, it could burn on the bottom of that, and then the steam and whatnot could taint the flavor, and I don't want a burnt flavor here. So that's why I'm adding the water. It's not to steam it or anything. I'm not going to cover it. So next, I have an internal thermometer here. I'm going to stick it in the thickest part, right in the middle if I can. I am going to cook this at 250 until it reaches an internal temperature of 150 degrees. Why not 140? You could do 140 if you're going to cook all of it as you use it again, right? So if you're going to eat this cold, 150, and I do have some intention of some cold slice, so I am going to cook it to 150, and that's just to make it safe. You can do 140. Use your best judgment on how you intend to use your Canadian bacon. So I am going to set my timer here to temperature read instead of timer, so that when it reaches that 150 degrees, it'll go off and I'll pull it out. Then I'm going to let it completely cool before I slice it, and that's when I'll see you next. This took about 2.5 hours for my cook time. I don't think I really talked about that. It really depends on how big your pork loin is. So if it's really big, it's going to be longer. Obviously, if it's smaller, it's going to be less time. So gauge it by the size, and just keep an eye on your temperature. I really do like that in meat thermometer that you can have right into it, and monitoring things and keeping an eye on your temperature so that you don't have to babysit it so much. So just wait for that beeping sound. So this is where we're at. It looks really good. Of course, I have the marks from the rack. I don't know why I couldn't say rack. Okay, rack. So I'm just gonna go ahead and get right down to it. I want thin slices. Oh, look at that, it's beautiful. There we go. That, for me, is perfect. Okay. And what I will do is just, you only want to slice off what you're going to use. And I'm going to use this much to try it. Well, I'm pleased with how this turned out. It's not overly salty. I am glad that I gave it that extra little bit of time in some cold water after I rinsed it. The salt content is really Like, you can taste the salt as you should for a cured meat, but it's not overpowering like it sometimes can be. So this was a perfect balance. I liked the sea salt in it, so fabulous. I'm very happy with it. So if you'll watch the next couple of videos, you'll see what I'm going to make with it coming up next. Thanks for joining me here today in the Let's Make Food from Food Kitchen. From my kitchen to yours, let's make food from food.
That's one board.